Hey y'all. I just want to share with you guys what was made apparent to me. I want to talk to you guys about humility and just what humility is, what all it entails. So I was watching a video yesterday, 30 Minutes with the Perrys. Love them, shout out to them. And Preston was talking about Jesus being God and how Jesus is God and how Jesus exemplified the greatest humility ever because he was equal to God because he is God. He's God in the flesh. He was God in the flesh, and how he really just exuded humility because true humility is knowing that you have all of these privileges. You have what it takes. You that deal, but you forfeit it for the greater good, and you forfeit it in obedience to God and the greater calling at hand. And so I've been reading and studying 1 Samuel, and I just got to 2 Samuel, and what really was highlighted to me was David's humility, because Saul was on his head. Like, Saul was coming for David, trying to kill him because he was jealous, because David was that deal. And David had plenty of chances to literally kill Saul and be off with his head. But David was submitted to God. David was obedient to God. Like, because Saul was, at the end of the day, no matter how cruel he was still initially the Lord's anointed. Like, the Lord anointed Saul to be king of Israel. And David was submitted to God and being obedient to him. Like, even though I had the opportunity, he didn't take it because he was submitted to God. And that just really just blessed me because David had what it took. Everybody was like hyping David up, saying Saul killed thousands and David killed 10,000s, and made a whole song like, David, you that man, yada, yada, yada. David could have easily been like, hey, off with Saul's head. He could have overthrown him. He had what it took. But he was obedient to God. And eventually, David was brought up as the king, and all of it, like, it was prophesied, all of these things, that David was going to be king. He could have prematurely gotten away. He could have had his will be done and not God's. But ultimately, he waited. He did what he was obedient to the present. He was obedient to the now, and eventually he was brought up as king of Israel. But he waited on God's will. He waited and humbled himself, knowing he had the privilege, knowing he had the skill set, knowing he even had the backing of Israel, knowing all of these things, but submitted himself and surrendered. He humbled himself and allowed God to exalt him. So that just made me think of, like, wow, like, when you're humble and you allow God to exalt you, you allow room for God's way to happen. Sure, we're qualified to do all of these things, and we have the skill set to do all of these things, but when we humble ourselves and we allow God to do it, and we allow God to do things his way, we allow room for obedience, we allow room for God's exaltation, and ultimately that's what we want. We want God's exaltation. We don't want things to happen our way, because we know we know what happens. We live in a culture that's go get it, da 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 da. Like, we have what it takes. But I encourage you guys to, and I'm learning this right now, and so this is why I wanted to share with you guys. Humble yourself. Yes, you have what it takes, but God knows everything that needs to be pruned. He knows everything that needs to be added, to be taken away in this season. And so I just encourage you guys to allow God to fully equip you. Allow God's way to happen. Allow God to do things in his own time. And so my prayer this morning was like, Lord, take your time to equip me to my fullest extent. Help me to humble myself so that your will may happen the right way. So I hope this helps. I hope this encourages you to wait on the Lord, be obedient in the now, and allow God to exalt you. I promise you, you do not want a premature blessing, because then it won't be able to blossom in its fullness. Give time. And yes, God gives grace. I want to double back on that. God gives grace when we do things prematurely, and I thank God for it. But why even go through all of that trouble? Just allow God to do things in his own time. And that's the best way. So, love y'all. Be blessed. Make somebody smile today. And remember, if it's not helping you grow, it's a no. Love y'all.